This is Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkle.
Welcome to Inside the Wolf's Den. This is your host, Shawn. And we got my co-host, Joni, that's laughing at me here because, I don't usually introduce the show, but obviously you can see we have fun, right? With this show. Yeah. So
it is always
I hope
fun.
everybody that listens to this is having fun too. So she laughs at me a lot more than you guys know, but we have fun with this. So I hope, I think we're going to be talking about a really hot topic today. And, we hope we're going to add a lot of value as far as giving you the pros and cons to short-term rentals and what we have seen, being that we're in the property management space. Obviously, we get exposed to a lot of short-term rentals or asked to rent or people moving them over. So,
and I think, we don't manage short-term rentals. That's not something we do. I always say that, do what you're good at, right? If it's not in your niche, then, don't even attempt to it because there's so many moving parts in the short-term rental space as well, right? Which we're going to get into. We have been having a lot of clients coming to us and said, hey, we're not able to lease our properties like we used to, right? Yeah. And so now might be the time to switch them over to long-term rentals.
Yeah, exactly. So one thing I wanted to mention before we dive into this is just if you guys do enjoy our content, you do enjoy Joni laughing at me throughout the show, we really would appreciate if you could share the show, share it with your guests. If you got some value out of that, maybe share why you got something out of it. Also rate it. It's just as we continue to try to grow the show and reach more people, we need your help. And so we would appreciate if you would share this and like it or rate it. We would appreciate it. So if you hate it, then just ignore it. But
let's get into it.
Yeah. So let's talk about it. So if we're going to talk about short-term rentals, which also many people call them Airbnbs because that's the company that probably does the most, and also VRBO.
Right. So I want to get into maybe the pros. What are the pros of short-term rentals?
Yeah, and just so you know where Joni and I are coming from. Like she said, we take over a lot of short-term rentals that people want to turn into long-term. Joni and I have personally owned a house that we placed on Airbnb for 3 or 4 years that we ran it?
About 3 years.
Yeah. And we're throughout this show, we're going to tell you our personal experience with running that one. We've only had one, so we're not experts by any means, but I personally did the day-to-day operations of it. So I can attest to what I'm talking about with that one. But just what we've seen, we're always a part of masterminds where there's some really, really good operators that are doing
high-end ones.
High-end ones. They're doing multiple. I highly recommend checking out episode 50 where we had the Plantes and they talked about what they did in their Airbnbs and the how they separated themselves from many of the people that do short-term rentals. And so recommend you listen to that show and get more out of that. But let's just talk about some of the pros, and advantages to doing short-term rentals. So if you just have a property, Joni, or you're thinking about purchasing property as an investment, what are some of the things that advantages to having a short-term rental?
I think, initially you look at the additional income, right? So, if you renting out a short-term rental a property versus the long-term, you're going to get more in rent, right? And so.
And just to clarify that, when we say short-term, we're talking about nightly rentals. So this would be much like a hotel. You can rent the house, and a lot of people, we always had a 2-night minimum, so you'd have to rent for 2 nights. Part of that's just to justify a lot of times the cleaning fees and the turnover. But we would do a 2-night minimum. Some people do a 3-night, depending if you can get away with it. Some people just do 1 night, but it's a nightly rental or weekly versus a long-term lease is
12 months.
12 months.
8 to 12 month lease.
Yeah. Or longer.
Or even longer.
2 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I agree. It does produce more income than a traditional long-term lease because you're doing it monthly. Now, this is if you can rent it at least 50% or more of the month, correct?
Yeah.
And through when COVID hit and then after COVID and people started traveling again, Airbnbs or short-term rentals just took off, right? And they did very well because people were traveling again. People have been locked up. They wanted to get out. They were renting these. They felt more comfortable renting these because they were with their families, whatever. And so, and then people worked from home. So you saw all these people that were saying, well, rather than working from my house, I'm going to go work in the Rocky
where
Mountains.
I want to,
yeah. And,
where I want to be.
and so I can work from there. They have internet, and then I can work during the day, and then I can go have fun or whatever. And
Yeah,
so
which is why we kind of purchased the Airbnb in Albuquerque, is because I would go work down there, you know, and I would stay in there, and then I would lease it out the rest of the time, right, and make additional income that way.
Yeah, that was the main reason we approached the one house that we purchased. Is we wanted something that we could use while we traveled to Albuquerque frequently,
right?
Because of our businesses there.
Yeah, which allows for, again, the second point is flexibility, right? Yeah. So you can rent it when you want to.
Okay, so there's
block it out when you don't.
There's a lot of people that do that. I know. Even episode 50, the guests that we had on our show, they do a very high end, very large home. So they cater to more the
like families,
big families, or the family reunions, or the big parties, or the corporate events. And then, but the thing that they did was they chose areas that they want to travel to.
Right.
So like the Guadalupe River, the
New Orleans,
the beach, or the lakes where they, you know, where they frequent or they like to travel to. And so when it's not rented, they can utilize it. And then for us, we utilized it for work.
Yes.
And it worked really well. So there are options out there. So if you frequent a vacation destination frequently, that would be something maybe to get an investment. You stay there quite when you want to use it, and then the rest of the time you rent it out and make money off it. So sometimes at least your trips or your rentals can be free during the time that you use it.
Right.
So you can usually get higher rental rates than a traditional long term. So you can again, it commands more because you're renting it on a nightly basis. So you're going to command more in rent. And we'll get into the cons and what's getting into that, especially during peak season. So this is another. The cool part is you can take advantage of, depending on where you're located. And I think, again, this goes down to location, here, real estate, location, right? So we would, when the Bloom Fiesta was going on in Albuquerque, we were getting what? 10 times the amount of rent that we could get on a traditional night.
Right.
So you can get substantially more during peak times, or during Christmas, you can get higher rates, Thanksgiving, that kind of thing. But the Bloom Fiesta, so if there's events that you cater around, you can do really well as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What about?
So I have a question, like, an investor wants to get into short-term rentals versus, long-term rentals. Like, what are maybe some things that they look for, for them personally? Should they start with a regular rental versus a short-term rental?
Yeah, it's a good question. I in my personal opinion, I think they need to be in a market, that, or in an area that demands you got to do your due diligence. You got to put together a business plan. You got to study the market. You should be studying the Airbnbs and the VRBOs in that area where you're thinking of buying. Study where are they getting higher rents, study the rents that people are getting nightly versus what you can buy the homes for, the investments for in that area. It's got to make sense,
right? And
you got to be able to justify the cost. The downside is, the real big problem that we've had the last several years is everybody was into it, and it was one of those things like your barber, you went to the grocery store, whatever. Everybody was getting into them.
And
right?
I think on social media, especially, you see all these short-term rentals are
I'm
great.
making $40,000 a night.
Look at this,
a month. Yeah.
This mansion, this beauty. Like, this is what I've done, and so to the public, it looks like it's all great, right? And so, but really don't talk about. I mean, you really need to know your numbers there as well.
Correct.
What
it costs, and I think a lot of people are feeling that pain now that didn't do the due
right, because when it does blow up, say the market changes and corrects, then those are the hardest to lease out, and you have to adapt fairly quickly, or else you have no income coming in.
Yeah, so I think places that are very desirable vacation destinations are great places. Right. You can do fairly well, but you also got to look at the competition. So study that, and so if you're thinking like Disney or something like that, around Disney, study how many there are around Disney, and you'll see that it's a lot.
Yeah.
So because you're competing against them, so if they drop their prices here to just get it full that night,
You got to be prepared to drop your prices as well.
So vacation rentals is a big one. I think where people travel to for work can be another option. Our personal Airbnb that we ran in Albuquerque for many years, the majority of the people that rented our place was
their second home,
traveling nurses, there for work, and they needed a place for a week. That was the traveling nurses was probably the biggest one that we got, but there was more work centric that rented ours, so and kept it busy. But that because ours wasn't like by the mountains, or wasn't in Old Town, or wasn't in an area that does, people wanted to travel to
a tourist destination.
Yeah.
Correct.
It was more of a
but
business.
I agree, and I think like if you're looking to get into short-term rentals, I mean, get one, buy one that you maybe will be traveling to, so you can use it and experience that. On your first one, so you can use that as an experiment, really.
Yeah, and also. The type of home or condo or investment, I think, matters too. So you need to study that. So like you really need to study, okay, how much does a 3-bedroom versus a 2-bedroom get? How much does a 4-bedroom demand in that area versus a 2? It matters because it's going to, it might be the difference between you doing really well and not. And so, or does condos in this area work, or does only single family homes go on? Or in our case, where like our friends that was on episode 50, they went after like very large like
which nobody's really, there's not a lot of people in that market, but
it's expensive.
It is.
It's super expensive because you think about it sleeps 20 to 30 people. So you're talking about like 20 beds and all, so you can really add up. And then he built all his homes to cater to that. Not all homes are built in the mindset of that. We're trying to sleep a lot of people.
Make sure you have a marketing plan too. Where are you going to market to?
Yeah. So all that has to be thought through, I think, really well before you just jump into buying a home and thinking it's going to be a great Airbnb. Unless it's like a lot of people, if you're traveling there frequently and you use it as a vacation home and you just need to rent it to kind of make some extra money to help pay for it, so it's not all coming out of your pocket, that's a different story. But if this is a true business, you really got to take advantage of that.
Totally
really look at some other benefits are tax benefits. Of course, there's deductions, there's losses, there's expenses, maintenance, repairs, all that you can write off, utilities, all get to be written off. And then, like we mentioned before, the opportunity for personal interaction. This is one that I've seen a lot, like in like high dense areas. So a lot of people. Just to make
2 units or something.
Yeah, they live in
one and rent out the other.
Correct. Or so Joni and I use Airbnb and VRBO. So we we're consumers of it as well. So we've used them for when we've gone to Mexico.
Canada recently.
Yeah, we just got back from Canada. Now we used it there, and that one particular one was on a lake or on the ocean. And it was interesting that they had a unit downstairs that they used, or that the owners used, and then they rented out the upstairs.
Right.
And it was like so the people aren't in their personal space and all that, but then it was a 2-unit. I've seen that a lot. I've seen where people have
it's actually a smart idea because I mean you're making you're living in there and still making some income while you're there. So correct. Similar to house hacking, I guess.
Yeah, it's similar to house. Yeah, and people do it with their garage apartment. I've known people that have actually moved into the back unit or the garage and then rented out the big house. Especially if you're trying to get ahead or you're trying to save.
If I was young in my college years, I would definitely do that.
So there's opportunity. And then there's some people that just love the interaction of renting and they're interacting with their guests and, putting flowers. We used to do wine or special coffee. You try to make it, the ones that do well are the ones that make it really interactive. So, and so like one of the reasons we went this summer to the beach and we rented an Airbnb because we wanted to do something different than just staying in a hotel. And what really attracted us to the one we bought was they had canoes.
They had bikes they had, things for the kids to do. So,
It was fun. And so like outside of going to the beach or going to the amusement park and that we had fun canoeing and going out. It had those what is it called? The bikes with 2 seats. Anyway, there's a name for them. But I mean, it was fun. And we'd never ridden a bike like that, and we had a good time with it. And so but that's what made us rent that one. So I think if you can personalize your Airbnb, I think you can add a lot. And then there's some really cool companies out there that are partnering with Airbnbs, and so they'll put your products sometimes for free. Oh,
yes, I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. So they'll give you personalized products that you can put in your Airbnb as long as you have to have the QR codes and stuff like that. So like people can scan a product and be like, oh, I can buy it here at this person. And they'll give you, because it's free advertising for them. So if you're a good marketer, you can sometimes supply some of the furniture, some of the stuff in your Airbnb to
why not?
Furniture. So before we go into the cons though, Joni, and it's just going to lead into the cons, but I think what people highly underestimate is the work it takes, right, to run an Airbnb, right? It just sounds great. It sounds like, okay, extra money, higher rental rates, tax benefits. What in your experience, what was it like when I was managing? Because I
thought it was going to be easy. I was just going to go, travel. Well, I went back to Albuquerque and stay there, and it all sounded great, right? Until we started buying all the furniture and like what the cost of that was going to be, right? And then once we actually had it, like you managing it all hours of the night, really, right?
It's a pain in the butt. Really, I feel maybe I just, and I know you can 100% outsource all this to management companies that manage, but they'll take 20 to 30% of the rent, and so that's
and I tried, but Shawn wanted to handle it himself and see how to understand it. Yeah. But I mean, you get, guests who lock themselves out or they can't get into the house, and so you have to somebody's got to be available to help them in those situations.
And you depend on being a what do they call it, like a super host, and it gives you, your listings gets rated higher, you get more exposed, people are more comfortable renting from you because you're and you depend on your reviews, and so you really got to cater to these people like quickly because you want to have good reviews, and so
and not only that,
Johnny on the spot,
Johnny on the spot, and then once you have a move out, right, and somebody moving in that next day, you're scrambling to get it cleaned and sheets and bedding replaced and all of that, and so that you can get a new tenant in there.
Correct. And there's ways to streamline a lot of this. We used August, I think it was the lock and app that synced with Airbnb, and so like it would automatically, when they booked, it automatically give them their code to the lockbox for their timestamp, and then it changed it automatically depending on when. So there's things you can do to make it really cool and the experience, but the lock would break or the batteries would die, or and then you have to plan a lot with the cleaning lady,
right? And have them on standby in case you do have a quick move out, right?
And hear them complain every time, like we had a dirty person, or they had to do more work, and so there's all that you have to factor in, and then a lot of times when we stayed in it, we were doing maintenance or figuring out what things needed to be done while we were there. So I just go into it knowing that it's going to take effort, to research. It's going to take effort managing it unless you outsource it completely. And even then, there's things that you have to make some maintenance calls. You have to do some things managing the property manager that manages it.
Which is why we kind of managed it ourselves. We wanted to find out, like, truly what it was like, right? Because, we didn't do it again after that.
So I just know going in, it's not passive. It is a whole business within itself. And so that's what I'm getting at, is that it might be something that you think is just, hey, we can make some extra money. It is another business. It is work. It is time. And so
just like anything.
Yeah. So the cons are it's time and effort.
Yeah.
And that's what we're starting with. So it's managing short-term rentals can be time consuming. Just dealing with the guest communication. They want to know this, they want to know that. They ask for restaurants, and you got to be a good host, you have to. So I had a list of restaurants. I had it embedded in the automatic emails so that it would send them, hey, here's my top 10
restaurants
top 10 restaurants, top 10 things to do while you're in Albuquerque.
Yeah. And we had a little kind of a binder about us as well in the house where, our bio and who we were. And so they can, they had all that at their fingertips as well.
Correct.
So,
but it takes work, but we try to make it an enjoyable experience while they're there. You definitely have vacancy and seasonality. So there's ebbs and flows with this, and it's
we're like, man, what's going on? Like it's super silent, and then like the next month, like it's busy, right? And so it's up and it seemed to be
constantly
up and down.
watching your rates, and some of those systems like Airbnb and RBO, you can allow them to adjust it based upon the demand. But I was always trying to really watch and engage it. But again, the more you manage it, the more you're on top of it, the better you can do, but it takes a lot of work.
Yes.
This is a big one. Legal and regulatory considerations, right? This is what you
I mean, I think, I think a lot of the cities are regulating on short-term rentals. Number one, we don't have a whole lot of inventory out there right now. And so I think that you're going to see a lot more of that where there's going to be regulation on short-term rentals, right? And I think we've seen it in certain markets already.
Yeah. And it's 100% out of your control.
Right.
And there's nothing you can do about it. And I think hotels and lobbyists are really pushing against them and so it's going to be harder and harder.
And they're just what they're doing. They're making it more difficult for you, right, to put a short-term rental where it's not even worth it.
So like even in Albuquerque while we were there, we had to pay a fee to have a short-term rental, to have a permit. And then we had to do I think it was yearly inspections on the home. So just know if you're getting into that, a lot of these cities are starting to implement they want to make money off of it. So they implement some kind of fee, a permit fee, and then an inspection that comes with it. So, but it's getting harder and harder, and there's licensing regulation. So make sure you check everything up front before you purchase and buy a home. Make sure you're going to be
allowed in the community you're looking in.
Increased wear and tear, right?
Yeah.
Why are you laughing?
Go ahead. Increased wear and tear.
Yeah. See, she's laughing at me again. So I must have done something. So, there's going to be higher turnover and the more frequent. And so people are they stain the carpets. They
pour wine all over on accident.
Yeah. There's all sorts of nasty things. They ruin sheets. They tear up your... I'm just painting a bad picture. They mess up your...
Sean's really passionate about short-term rentals.
Just could be more wear and tear because the people are coming frequently in and out. It's your stuff. They don't care. And you have deductibles and insurance and stuff like that, but it's still, it's a pain to deal with it and to collect. And I think one time we had a party. Somebody threw a party one time, right? And they were
destroyed it. I mean, they didn't destroy it, but it was nasty.
I know we've had. If you listen to episode 50, they had an instance where it was 4th of July and they rented to I think a big biker group and they were lighting fireworks in the house and like just crazy stuff that you just you don't realize. I've had people that I had a lady one time that like gave me a bad review and she was calling me like nonstop throughout her whole time she rented the place.
And she said that we put her in a bad neighborhood.
Yeah, she was like, you need to disclose if you put people in. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I've stayed there. My wife goes by herself there. And she's like, I heard a gunshot last night. I'm like, ma'am, you're in Albuquerque. Like, haven't you seen Breaking Bad? I mean, if you watch Cops at all, like it's on every cop
You
show.
did not tell her that. I hope not anyway. No, that's what you're thinking though.
But like, it's like, I've never heard gunshots while I'm there. I don't know. But like, and she was like, that I didn't disclose up front. She reported me to Airbnb that we didn't disclose that it was a crime infested area. I didn't think it was, but
the joy.
Yeah. So this is our fifth and final con is the guest related challenges.
Yeah.
So
and you mentioned that too, but I think also when we decided to pivot and change, right? We're like, all right, short term's not for us. And then we're just speaking for ourselves. I mean, you guys might love it and that's great, as long as you know what you're doing. I mean, obviously long-term rentals is our thing, right? But when we decided to part ways with short-term rentals, we were like, well, what the heck are we going to do with all this furniture?
Yeah.
Right. And we have actually a lot of clients that come to us and like, well, I want to pivot and change into long-term rental because this is not going well.
Yeah.
And so we always have to figure out what we're going to do with the furniture. So that can definitely be a pain. We sold our house with everything in it.
Yeah, that was we also own a self-storage complex, so we give them the option we can move it into our self-storage.
I'm selling everything included in there.
Yeah, so we just sold the whole house with everything in it, and it worked. It's helped get us the price. The reason we truly exited, just so you know, our personal experience, it was in Albuquerque. The market had really appreciated, and we sold it last year. So the market just really ran up, and like I got a number that I never thought I could get for that house. So it was just it was just a good time for us to exit, and we were done with it. So that's the reason we exited, and really that's the reason you should exit any business. And we had money, an area where we could roll that money into. It just made the right time for us.
You should always have an exit strategy.
Yeah,
everything you do. Right.
Yep. So, but we've been at, we've seen more and more over the last year, the amount of calls and the amount of people that have been moving over to short-term rentals.
From short-term to long-term.
Yeah. So
Correct.
we've been helping them make that transition.
Yeah. Which is a sign that the
things
market
are really
is slowing down. And so I think my advice to anybody out there is if you do have short-term rentals and you're looking to, turn those into long-term rentals, I mean, know when to pivot and change, right?
Correct.
And
just
don't wait till the last minute to do it.
A lot of our really good friends that do these high-end ones or they're successful at it, they have little to no debt on the buildings or on the properties, so that really allows
on the downtimes.
So they allow. Yes, they might not make the income they wanted for that year, but they can afford to ride it out. But if you have you're a lot of these people overpaid for these short-term rentals, then they furnished them and spent $50,000-$60,000 on decking them out. Then all of a sudden you have all this debt on it,
and you have to pay out taxes, insurance, utilities, internet, permits. That all adds up.
Correct. So if you're not renting it, you're only getting 30% occupancy for the month. All of a sudden, you're negative cash flow, and that's what people that have been coming to us. They're starting to see negative cash flow. It's not the high returns that they thought.
Right. So, and if you're the person that wants to try to get into short-term rentals, like Shawn mentioned, do your due diligence. Know what you're getting into,
and know that inventory has dramatically increased in the Airbnb space or the short-term rental. So that's putting a good strain. So everybody's price shopping against each other. So the thing that I want to recommend is just study the market, have a business plan, be in a desirable destination, the right size of home, the right fit for that area, or be unique. Like episode 50, the guests on there, they're unique. The type of home they build, the right amenities and unique characteristics that make yours stand out, or like canoes and bikes and stuff that just don't normally come with Airbnbs, and then be prepared to manage it, to have your if you're going to self-manage, have your cleaners, have your maintenance guys, have people that are going to help you. If you're in town, is that going to be you? And
quite honestly, I think that there's some great short-term property management companies out there as well. So just like the long term, if you don't want to worry about dealing with the hassles of it, that's a good option for you as well.
Then you better be prepared in your due diligence and
to include that,
a 20 or 30% of your rent
Correct.
is going to go out to somebody else to manage. And that if that budget and makes sense, then go for it. And then I also think that you should also, if it doesn't work as a long-term rental, maybe not consider it. So it's got to work for both. So if it works out for a long-term, if you switch it to a long-term eventually down the road, and it works out, that's great. And then if it for short-term and right now you can make a lot of money with it, great. And then
because think about it, if you can't lease it out as a long-term rental, maybe it's the house is too big for the area. You're not gonna, it's gonna be hard for you to lease out or whatever the case may be is. And
or government comes in and says, hey, no more short-term rentals in this market. Okay, what are you going to do now?
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to sell it? Because there's going to be a bunch of other people putting their houses on the market. So just be prepared is all we're doing, mentioning. So hope that helped. I don't know. We just added our 2 cents to short-term rentals. We, if you need help turning over yours from a short-term to a long-term, and you're in the Houston or Albuquerque market, we'd be happy to talk to you. But we hope you all have a great week. Anything else? Any final comments?
No, everyone have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkle. Tons of entrepreneurial podcasts are out there talking. But Joni and Shawn are living it every single day. Their portfolio now includes many franchises and medium-sized businesses. We talk about the trials and motivators of successfully running a business. Join us again soon for another podcast. But until then, reach out on the website at InsideTheWolfsDen.com, on Facebook at Inside the Wolf's Den, on Instagram at Inside the Wolf Den. We'll see you again soon. This is Inside the Wolf's Den. We'll see you next time.